First up on my list of players that will gain significant dynasty value this year is Packers running back A.J. Dillon. After a lackluster rookie season playing as the RB3 on the team, Dillon had a solid second season totaling over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns, finishing as the PPR RB21. But while he hasn't been an amazing fantasy asset yet, I think that 2022 changes things for Dillon, and I think we're about to see Derrick Henry 2.0. Take a look at Derrick Henry's start to his career. Rookie season, didn't do much playing behind DeMarco Murray, who had the lion's share of the touches and was the RB5 in fantasy that year. A.J. Dillon's rookie year, didn't do much playing behind Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams as well, but Jones had the lion's share of the touches that year and was the RB5 in fantasy that season. Year 2, Derrick Henry starts cutting into Murray's workload to where they're basically a 50-50 split rushing, but Murray is still the primary receiving back. Dillon's second season, he starts cutting into Jones's workload to where it's basically a 50-50 split rushing, but Jones is still the primary receiving back. Year 3 now, Derrick Henry has taken over, and while Murray is gone, Dion Lewis is still siphoning over 200 touches, including main receiving back duties. But we've seen the upside for Henry, who rushed for over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns in his first season with over 200 touches in his third year. And I think the same is about to happen in Green Bay, where Dillon is going to take over as the main ball carrier, with Jones still getting solid work every week, primarily through the passing game. That alone would raise Dillon's dynasty value a little bit, but like Henry, it would be the expectation that even more work is coming in 2023 that would significantly raise Dillon's value. And as we all know, Henry's fourth season in 2019 was the massive breakout year where he was trusted with basically the entirety of the backfield as Lewis ceded over 100 touches to Derrick Henry that season from the year prior. And I think Dillon is on the same path after this season. Aaron Jones is not long for this team. In fact, the Packers can cut Jones next offseason and save over $10 million in cap space. But even if Jones restructures and is still a Packer, he'll be 29 years old, and it'll be harder and harder for him to keep up with a 25-year-old A.J. Dillon. Dillon will also be in the final year of his rookie contract, so you could argue that Green Bay would want to maximize Dillon's rookie deal before making the decision to sign him long-term. Basically, every scenario of this ends the same, with Jones getting kicked to the curb and Dillon stepping into the workhorse RB1 role in 2023. That's what happened with Derrick Henry, and that's what I'm expecting to happen to Dillon. And when it does, he could be a top 10 dynasty running back by next spring, which is a significant increase from his current RB23 ADP. Next on the list is Broncos wide receiver Jerry Jeudy, and this might sound surprising considering my massive endorsement of Courtland Sutton as well, but I really believe that this entire Broncos offense is in for a huge 2022 season because of Russell Wilson. I honestly believe that both Sutton and Jeudy can be fantasy wide receiver ones this year, and I believe that even before Tim Patrick tore his ACL. Russell Wilson's best season was just back in 2020, which was also the season with the most pass attempts in his career at 558. In that season, Russ threw for over 4,200 yards and 40 touchdowns, and both Metcalf and Lockett were not only fantasy wide receiver ones, but they were both top 8 fantasy receivers. Even last year when Wilson was hurt and had arguably the worst season of his career, he still helped make DK and Lockett the wide receiver 15 and wide receiver 16 on the season. This is the talent and ability that Russ brings to the table in Denver, and both Sutton and Jeudy are in for massive seasons, I think. However, if both of those wide receivers produce very similarly, even as fantasy wide receiver ones, it's going to be Jeudy that would be the main beneficiary for Dynasty because he's 3 years younger than Sutton. Think about it. A 24-year-old receiver who had the first round in college pedigree, coming off a top 10 fantasy finish, connected to one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, how high do you think that player would be valued? Because my guess would probably be a top 10 Dynasty receiver. I mean, T. Higgins is currently the wide receiver 7. Jalen Waddle is the wide receiver 8. And even Metcalf right now is still the wide receiver 11, but was the wide receiver 6 before Russ was traded. So go out there, get Jerry Jeudy now at his current wide receiver 23 prices before a potential value explosion to being an elite dynasty asset. The final player on this list is someone that I'm sure you all have heard mentioned countless times as a dynasty buy, especially on this channel, but I have to put my stamp of approval on Jets wide receiver Elijah Moore. I mean, this dude is just going to be so good. I can't put it any other way. He's going to be so good. And we've dropped his dynasty value, even though we basically knew that they were adding another receiver in the draft. But I'm here to tell y'all that I am not afraid of Garrett Wilson. In fact, I've generally found myself lower on Wilson than a lot of other Dynasty analysts out there. I mean, yes, he was my rookie wide receiver 3, but he was not in the top tier with Drake London and Treylon Burks at all. I actually even highlighted very clearly on this channel that analytically there was almost zero difference between Wilson and his teammate Chris Olave, with the main differences coming from what people saw on film of the two, but analytically, they're almost identical. But of course, Wilson got the draft capital, which was almost a full round higher than what Elijah Moore got just the year prior, and that's what led to Moore's value falling and also him still being valued behind Garrett Wilson right now. Most Elijah Moore believers have pointed to T. Higgins last year as an example of a player who still succeeded and gained value despite another elite receiver joining the team. But to tell you the truth, they're wrong. Elijah Moore is not T. Higgins, and Garrett Wilson is not Jamar Chase. There was no doubt whatsoever that Chase was a better player than T. Higgins. Literally none. Chase was a perfect prospect by almost every measurement across the board. However, I am of the belief that Elijah Moore is a better receiver than Garrett Wilson because Moore was actually a better prospect than Garrett Wilson. Breakout age, point Elijah Moore. Career dominator rating, point Elijah Moore. Highest yards per team pass attempt, point Elijah Moore. Best market share of yards, Elijah Moore. BMI, Elijah Moore. 40-time, Elijah Moore. Speed score, identical.
But Garrett Wilson was competing with other first-round talent.
Moore played with A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf in his freshman season and produced similar numbers to Wilson's freshman season, competing with those two otherworldly talents. I truly believe that Elijah Moore is the Jets wide receiver 1 now, next year, and for the rest of his time on the team. And based on every report out of training camp, that belief is true. I talked about what would happen to Jeudy's value if he had a big season this year, and the same applies to Elijah Moore. If anything, the time is now to buy Moore just to get ahead of the third-year breakout hype that we're going to get next offseason when Moore gets labeled as the new Chris Godwin or the new DJ Moore, or what we're currently doing to Michael Pittman, who is the Dynasty wide receiver 12 right now. Elijah Moore, easy bet to gain a ton of value heading into 2023. But you don't have to take my word for it. You can just watch this video right here and listen to why Justin also loves Moore this year based on his 2021 rookie season.